The training today was delivered on the latest version of Office 365 as of the date of this recording.
So today we're going to go over how to create a checkbook register and also include a budget component to that, which can kind of go hand in hand with your checkbook. If you've seen any of the other videos that we've done so far, we've done a lot of stuff on conditional formatting, pivot tables, VLOOKUP, count sum, and several other ones that are out there on the channel. And this video is going to kind of combine most, if not all, of those videos to give you something practical that you can look at and maybe even use yourself, or at least apply the something that will help you in some project that you're working on. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Uh, I've taken the liberty of going in and doing a little bit of setup work. To begin with, I've created three tabs at the bottom of the screen. One's called a summary tab, one is your actual checkbook register, and then one is for some setup settings that we're going to put in. Now, we're going to start there. Whenever you do any kind of project, you need to kind of plan it out. And I'll admit, there have been occasions where I've just kind of thrown something together and figured it out as I went along. But you want to try to get some kind of a plan for what you're trying to accomplish, how you're going to get there, and not just the functionality, but you know, hey, I may need to, kind of report some of this information, and I may have to insert some, additional information in my sheets to be able to pull out data that I want to pull out. So just kind of think about that. We're going to go ahead and start with the settings tab. I've created three columns. One is for category, parent category, and check status. So these are all related to the category or parent category of what an expense might be for. At least the first two columns are. You may have a category of health insurance and life insurance that may belong to um, the parent category of insurance. Now, when I created or when we create this particular register, we're going to allow you to select both of these on the fly. The reason for that is you may have a dining category over here, and it may be attached to entertainment if it's for business, or if the particular expense is just, hey, we went to McDonald's and it's dining, and I may put it under miscellaneous or I may put it under regular dining. We want to give ourselves the flexibility to make that decision on the fly. We don't want to paint ourselves in a corner that we might not want to get out of, because we're going to probably want to report on some of this information, maybe by month. Maybe you want to say, hey, you know what, I'm spending a lot of money and I need to know how much revenue I spent out of my pocket that uh, were for frivolous things, or how much did I pay Alabama Power this year? Maybe I'm working on my taxes at the end of the year and I use that as a business expense. Anything like that, we want to be able to pull that out. So the final thing, or final column rather, is check status. We're going to use that so that we can tell our checkbook when a expense or a deposit has posted to our account. And that comes in really handy when you're balancing your checkbook, because it will help you show that this check or deposit has cleared. You don't need to worry about it anymore. And when you balance your checkbook next time, uh, we're going to use some conditional formatting to show that they've been posted, and it'll make it really easy for you to see on the screen that you don't have to necessarily pay attention to that particular record. So if we look over to the register tab, I've taken the liberty of creating this table. Officially, it's not really a table. I just started typing, but I put all the fields that we wanted to track. Now, obviously, we need to know the date of the transaction. If we have a check number, I give you the opportunity to put a check number in. I write very, very, very few paper checks. You could put a transaction number if you wanted to, if you did online banking, or maybe I use bill pay out of my checking account to write paper checks. if you wanted to go back in and get that check number after the fact, after it's processed, you could. I don't do that, but you could. Who are we paying the expense to? How much is the payment amount? If this were actually a deposit, we would enter the deposit amount in this column. There's a memo line, the category and parent category that we looked at a few minutes ago, and then check status. I went ahead and put an account balance on this screen just so that it would be handy while you're using the register. However, this is really going to be read-only. We're going to copy the field on our summary page that shows our balance so that you can just display it here in case you need to know. But this is going to be a calculated number, so you won't have the need to actually type anything in this box. So finally, I took the liberty of creating this page, which is our summary. Right now we have a beginning balance of $5,000. I just made that number up. Then we're going to have an actual um, account balance or register balance, which is going to go in this field. And we're going to have an estimated balance based on what our budget says. And I took our categories that were over here and I copied those and I've placed those here so that we can actually take our money that we have that's in our account and we can put that money into individual buckets. For example, your water bill, your natural gas bill, your fuel for your car bill, your entertainment bucket, your insurance buckets, miscellaneous, your mortgage, whatever yours are, you can edit this list and change those and get as detailed or as generic as you like. So what we're going to do, I've gone ahead and I just kind of divided up this revenue. I keep saying revenue, but I'm normally working with business numbers, but I've divided this money up across these categories. So you'll see that our budget total is $5,000, which matches our beginning balance. And again, that's just a number I made up. If we go back and look at our register, there's no expenses in here. Um, and we're ready to get started. So what we're going to do now, we're going to go in and we're going to create some things in the checkbook that's going to help do the work for us. So essentially, the only thing that you should have to do is enter your expenses and your deposits and then make adjustments to your budget as you spend or receive money into the account. So let's start with the register. Um, I know that my actual balance is going to be in this cell right here. So we're going to go over here to the register and we're just going to go in this blank where we've this little placeholder for our balance and we're just going to type the equal sign. We're going to click on the summary tab and then we're going to click on the actual balance and we're going to press enter. Okay, looking at it, nothing happens, but this is where when we put our formulas in, this is where our account balance is going to show up. The next thing we want to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to set up this formula so that we know what our actual balance is. Now, to do that, I've got to do one or two more things over on the register. And like we discussed a few minutes ago, this is where we're going to put in the amounts of our checks. And this is where we're going to put in the amounts of our deposits. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to the very bottom of the sheet, and I've got these highlighted. And I'm going to auto sum this field because what I want at the bottom of this table, I want the total amount of expenses. Now you can type in the formula equals sum and then put in your range, but if you just hold down the alternate key and press equal, this little box will pop up. You can press the up arrow to get the last cell and then hold down control and shift and press the up arrow and it's going to go all the way to the top. Now we don't want payment amount in there, so I'm going to continue to hold the shift key and I'm going to drop down by hitting the down arrow key and that'll move our selection. Now once I have that done, I can just grab the period in the bottom right hand corner where it gives me a crosshair symbol, and I can just drag that to the right. And now we've got a total for our payments and we've got a total for our deposits. So with that being said, we're going to come back over to the summary page and we're going to click on cell B4, which is our actual register balance. And we're going to say that this is going to be equal to our beginning balance minus our payment totals. These are our expenses. We want to subtract those, and then we want to add our deposit total. So our actual register balance is $5,000, and that's what it should be, because if we looked at our beginning balance, which I just manually entered in that field, and then we look at our register, there are no deposits or expenses, and that tells me that that is correct. Now we're going to go test that here in a few minutes, but the next thing we want to do is we want to look to see what our estimated balance according to our budget is. And we're going to put a formula in here, and it's going to say that the estimated balance is going to be, or the estimated budget is going to be equal to the estimated balance minus the budget total. So we're going to say that this is equal to the actual balance minus the budget total. Now, this can be a little confusing. So what we basically said is that our actual balance was $5,000 and we subtracted the total budget, which I had manually entered, and it equals $5,000. So if you subtract those two numbers, it's zero. Okay? That's what you want, because you're saying that if we spend all of the money in our budget, that we're going to have no money left. So here's what you don't want to have happen. Let's say that this 500, so you accidentally typed in 750 instead of 500. So this tells us that we are $250 short. We've got more money in our budget than we do in our account. Now, if we flip that on the other side, we accidentally typed 400 instead of 500. Well, now this is telling us that we have an extra $100 in our account that is not accounted for in our budget. So this measure, by putting this estimated balance in here, is a handy tool to make sure that your budget balances your account, at least in this spreadsheet. Now, if you forgot to write something down in your register, all bets are off. But this is a really good way to um, to ensure that you don't have too much money down here, and you may overdraw your account if you're not paying attention, or if you don't have enough and you've got money that you can put in any one or more of the buckets that are over here. So before we go any further, since I've showed you that or shown you that, I'm going to put a little bit of conditional formatting on the estimated balance field. What we're going to do is we're going to click on the Home tab. We're going to go over to Conditional Formatting, and we're going to highlight cells that are uh, less than $0. So if they're less than 0, we're going to do a custom format. We're going to do a font of bold and a color of red. So if we had put 700, it's going to show up in red, and it's going to be something that'll jump out at us that, if we were just looking at all these black numbers, that may not, it may not pop out, we may not see it. So we're going to make it turn red. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to do another conditional formatting rule, and this one is going to be greater than. So we want this one to be greater than $0, so I'm going to put a 0 right there. We're going to do custom. We're going to make it bold, and we're going to make it blue. So now, if we see that it's blue and not red, red is bad. That mean in this example, that means we don't have enough money to cover our budget. We need to make some adjustments. But if we see that it's blue, that means I can distribute $100 in this example in one or more of my buckets below. Now I'm just going to put this one back the way it was. And now we're back to 0 and there's no color. So that's a good way to use a conditional formatting. Okay, so now let's jump over to our register. Let's say that we wrote a check check number was 1235, it doesn't matter. And we're going to pay this to Walmart. And our payment amount was $65.50. This was not a deposit, so we're going to skip that. And we're going to just say grocery shopping. We want to put in what our category for this particular expense is going to be. Now, I could go over here and I could say groceries, but that's going to be a big, an inconvenience when you're typing all these in. So what we want to do, we want to go ahead and we want to create some data validation. And we're going to do that by adding a drop-down list that looks at our categories and our parent categories um, so that we can select those from a list instead of actually having to type them in every single time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this entire column with the exception of the heading, the header rather, and we're going to go to the very bottom of the page minus that last row, and we're going to click on data and we're going to click on data validation. Now remember, this is our category column is what we're looking for. So we're going to click on data validation and then we're going to click data validation again. On our settings tab for validation criteria under the allow drop-down box, we're going to choose list. Now that we've chosen list, we're just going to click on source. Make sure you have to click this box and get your cursor in this box, and we're going to go to the settings tab and we're going to highlight all of the choices, and then we're going to click OK. Now since we're here, let's go ahead and do this for parent category. List, parent category, and remember whatever order that this data is in alphabetically is how it's gonna, or however how it is in here. It may not be alphabetically or not. Most people will choose to sort it alphabetically so that if they have a lot of them, it'll be easier for them to find the choice they're looking for. But we're going to click OK, and you'll notice they're going to appear in the same order that they were in the list. That's what I was trying to get to. And let's go ahead and do check status. We're going to need that too. And for posted, we definitely want to make sure that we do posted and blank. So while we're over here, you'll also notice that the account balance updated when we added this check, and we put that when we created our account balance formula from the summary tab. So this is groceries. We're going to just click on groceries, and we're just going to put dining. Normally I would have probably had another groceries here, um, but that'll be fine. And then our check status hasn't gone through yet, so we're going to leave it the way it is. Now, let's think about that for a second. So, you know, after a couple of months, I'm just going to have a ton of entries in this register, and it will be so much simpler to kind of allow myself to ignore the ones that don't matter anymore, the ones that have already posted. So what I want to do is I want to put a visual indicator on the rows to determine or to identify whether or not these transactions have posted or have not. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight the entire row, and then I'm going to go all the way to the bottom with the exception of the last row, and I'm going to add some conditional formatting. So to do that, I'm going to go to the Home tab, and I'm going to click Conditional Formatting. In this case, we're going to create a formula to tell it what we want to format, so we can't necessarily use the ones we used earlier in the video. But we're going to click on New Rule, and we're going to choose the one that says use a formula to determine which cells to format. Now, what we want to format all the cells to change their color based on the value of what's in column I. Column I is the check status, and I can't show you without, here, let's just do this. Column I is the check status, and that's where we're going to put either blank or posted. So we're going to go back in, we're going to do a new rule. We're going to use a formula to determine which cells to format, and the formula that we're going to use, it says format values where this formula is true. So the first formula we're going to enter is equal $I2 because we need this to be absolute. We've used the $sign in front of it. I2 is right here, and that has to equal, we have to put our text in quotes. We're going to call this posted. Because if you remember, in close quotes, because if you remember on our settings tab, that's what we had put in as what our response was going to be. Now what we're going to do is we're going to format this to bold, and we're going to change the color to green. Now if you wanted to fill the box with you know, the background of the whole cell being green and make your text white or black, you can do that. That's fine. You just go over to fill and choose that. But with as much color as going to be on this spreadsheet, it's going to make it very, very busy, and to me it's annoying. So I'm just going to hit OK. And then we're going to hit OK again. Now I'm going to leave everything selected, and I'm going to go create one more rule. We're going to click Conditional Formatting and New Rule. Use formula to determine which cells to format. This time we're going to say equals $I2 equals, and I'm just going to put 2 quotation marks because we're looking for blank. If there's nothing in there, we want to format it so that it's bold and the color is red. This means that it's not posted. It's still, oh, it's an open transaction or an open check out of your checkbook. So we're going to hit OK, and we're going to hit OK. And you'll notice that as soon as we did it, this one turned red. So what we're going to do, we're going to pretend that this check is already posted. When I click on posted, it turns green. So now you'll have a very easy to see visual indicator when you're going through your checkbook. Hey, I balanced my checkbook last week. I marked this as posted and now it's green. I don't really need to worry about it anymore. Um, Provided that you confirm that it was posted and that the amount was correct. So let's go back to the summary tab. Now that we've added this transaction, let's go to the summary tab and see how it affected our budget. Okay, so it picked up that $65.50 that we put in here. It updated our balance. Instead of 5,000, it's $4,934.50. And our budget is out of whack by that check that we just wrote. So if it was going to come out of dining or groceries, you could come down to groceries and manually just say, okay, 200 minus 65.50 is X. Or since we're not really changing anything else, I can change groceries to 0 just by deleting it. And now it tells me that my new total for groceries should be 134.50. And now our checkbook's back in budget. Now, if I had written multiple checks that were going to come out of different buckets in our budget, it may not be quite that easy. You may actually have to do some math on your own, but you get the gist of it. So now let's go back to the register and let's enter a deposit. And you can leave that blank or you can just put deposit. And instead of putting here, you're going to put your deposit in, your deposited amount, and we're going to say that this was $2,500. And in our memo, we're going to put tax refund. I think I have a category for tax refund and a parent category. And we're just, for the heck of it, we're going to say that this was posted. Okay, now you noticed your account balance updated. Account balance updated, but we got too much money in our account. Um, well, you can never have too much money in your account, but you have a higher balance in your account than what your budget says. So we're going to go down to tax refund. We'd already had that as a category, and we're just going to add $2,500 to that bucket. So now we're back in alignment. Everything's balanced. The checking account balances to the budget. Our information is over here in our register, and everything looks good. So what I'm going to do now, because I'm going to show you a couple extra features, and this just isn't enough data to do it, I've got another copy of this where I've entered a few extra transactions. And now we'll come over here. We're $39 off. I'm just going to go to miscellaneous and delete that. And then it should be 1686. So now everything's back in alignment. Uh, there's a few things that you can do. Let's talk about maybe graphing. Maybe I want to graph maybe a pie chart to show my budgeted amounts, my buckets. It's really simple. You're just going to select the column with the heading and the column with the money in it. We're going to go to Insert. We're going to go to Pie Charts. And for this example, we will choose this 3D one now. These charts, because we have so many categories, um, it could be complicated to read. Okay, so I could change the name of my chart. Maybe I want to call it budget summary or category summary. Um, because there's so many, it's really complicated because you can barely see. I mean, unless you blow your chart up ginormous. Plus that there are so many different categories, it's difficult to see. Now, what you can do as well also is you can right click on the pie chart itself and choose data labels, add data labels, and by default, um, this one shows up as money. So this one's $2,500. This one's 150. The colors for the text and the shapes don't line up very well, but we'll show you how to change that here in a second. What I would typically do in this, I would go to Format Data Labels and I would take the revenue out and add percentage and then take the value out. And that'll show a percentage, which you'd still have to compare the colors down in the legend to make sure you had that right. Another thing you can do, you could click on um, your actual percentages. Let's say, this 34% is really difficult to read because of the colors. And let's click it one more time and it'll only select this one. And then under text options, we can change it to white's probably a good color. You can also, and you can do that to each one of those if you choose to. There's also options that you can make the size of the percentage numbers increase so that they're larger and they show up better on the screen. Now, this, like I said, this works fine. It does what it's supposed to do. What may help you better is maybe a bar graph. And again, we're going to go to Insert. We're going to go to Bar Graphs. Let's just choose this guy. And it's a lot easier to read. If you don't like blue, you can click on it and change the fill color. But it's a lot easier to read. You've got about $500 in your auto bucket. Comcast has got about 250. Entertainment looks like it has about, I don't know, 300. What does it say? 350, and so forth. A cool thing about this, if you want to see, if you want to kind of rank them, I mean, I can obviously look at this and see that my tax refund is the biggest, but you also have the ability to go in and sort and do a custom sort. And let's say we want to sort by column B. From largest to smallest. Now you'll notice that as soon as I sorted this table, it also sorted the chart. So, if you want to go smallest to largest, largest to smallest, or if you don't care, you just want them as they are, then you can do that too. And we'll delete that. So the next thing we're going to look at, I did a video on pivot tables. This would really be more for analyzing data that's in your register that is already passed. And if you want to do that, I'll show you again. I recommend looking at that other video if you haven't seen it yet. But the first thing that you have to do is we have to select the data that we're going to use for our pivot table. So we want all the data that's on this screen in the register, and we don't want to come back and have to redo this pivot table. So we're going to select the data all the way to the bottom of the page, minus that bottom row that had our totals. We don't want our totals in there. We just want the raw data. And now, once we have that selected, we're going to go over to Insert, and we're going to choose pivot table. Most of the time you can just click OK, but it's asking you to confirm your data range, and it's confirming that you want to create a new worksheet or add it to a sheet that already exists. For this example, we're going to just click OK. We're going to do a new sheet. I am going to slide that over, and we're going to call this pivot table. Now, if you use this pivot table to look for something specific and it's the exact same thing you're looking for every time you use it, you may want to name it something besides pivot table. So the first thing that I want to look at, I'm going to look at stuff related to my checks. So I'm going to insert a filter. That filter is going to be check status, and that's where it's either posted or not. And we'll be able to update that, and that will affect the results of our pivot table. The next thing we want to look at is I want to look at parent category, and I'm going to look at category after that, and then I want payment amounts. So to start with, we're going to look at everything, whether it's posted or not. And if you look, and I don't want deposits because we're looking at checks, and I don't want blank records. So now you can see that if we click on the utilities parent category, it's going to show us all of our uh, regular categories that we have that are listed under utilities. Comcast, natural gas, power, water, and so forth. So I could summarize and say I've spent $1,039 in utilities, or I could come back and say that I've spent $264 for power company. I've spent $100 for water, and so forth. Take it a step further, we could do it by date. So I could take a date and put that in my column header, and it'll show me that I spent 132 days in January, $132 in January, and $520 in February, and I apparently have written a check for March, for at least one check, for $387. I can go drill down further through utilities and see, where this money is going from. So again, it's just a way to mine the data so that you can see how much you're spending where. Um, Maybe whether it's for tax purposes, or maybe it's, hey, where's my money going? I've got to make some adjustments. What can I get rid of? Those kind of things. And you can do the exact same thing for your deposits. So I'm going to just copy that and paste it. You want to be really careful if you do this, because depending on how this pivot table, how you change its format, if it's going to grow and get bigger, it could run over this one, and sometimes it won't let you do it, or it's going to be bad news for your table. Um, I just did this for quickness, time reasons for doing this video. So what we're going to do now, um, and one thing I was going to show you over here that I forgot, uh, by checking this filter, if I leave posted checked, it's only going to show the ones that are posted. If I do not posted or blank, it's going to show you the ones that are not posted. I forgot to mention that earlier. Uh, so back to this one, we want to see deposits instead of our checks. So we don't want payment amounts. We want deposit amounts. Um, and we really don't need. Well, let's just leave them in here. So that's not going to work for that, because these categories don't line up, because I didn't have any data with deposits. Oh, it's because I had left out deposits. So we're going to select all, we're going to make them all blank. We're going to choose deposits, and there we go. So there's our deposits. If we wanted to look at just the postage, it's $2,000 in posted deposits, and there is $2,500 in non-posted deposits. That was in March the 30th. And there you go. So I think that wraps it up for the scope of this video. Hope you enjoyed.
We hope you enjoyed today's training. If you did, please subscribe to the channel and click on the bell to receive notifications for new training as they're released. Thanks, guys.